Hi guys, we are back down on plot 17, which is the old plot, and the only thing I've got left to do in this garden is pull out my Dahlia, which I am really nervous about. For anyone that doesn't know, my name is Peggy and I am growing a cut flower garden here on my allotment in Kanagawa Prefecture, Japan, which is just south of Tokyo in USDA Zone 9B. Thanks for checking out my channel. Okay, so this is the last week that we are allowed to be on the allotment, and you can see that everyone is down pulling out the last of the garden stuff, which is really sad to see. I'm so upset to be going. But for us, I did most of it before. The only thing I've got left to do is this end one where I have my salvia and all of my Dahlia tuber, and underneath my Dahlia are my tulips. So I'm really worried about moving these Dahlia because I obviously want to have them in the next garden, and I would quite like to keep them going as long as possible. And as you can see, they are still blooming. You know, they've kind of fallen through the netting here and need a bit more support, but I can still be getting flowers off these, although we are right at the end of September now. Our frost date isn't until like way into December, so I can have these keep going. The other thing is, it's too early for me to dig them up and take their tuber because the leaves haven't died back, and that puts all the energy back into the tuber so that I'm going to get Dahlia again next year. So I am going to have to try and dig these up as they are, plant them into the new garden, even if it's just to let them die back and get that energy into the tuber, and then I'm going to have to dig them up again probably around December and separate the tubers out. It's work I just don't need. I have my helpers in tow again this week to help me out with the weeding a little bit. Okay, so these are still really big, and I think realistically I'm going to have to cut these right back and cut them down a fair bit to be able to get the tubers out and transport them to the new garden, which means I might not get any more blooms off them, but you never know, I might still get a second flush in autumn. There's a nice tuber clump. Let's see how it does. So this one separated itself, and you can see that some of them are actually quite rotten. But that one looks good. So you can see on this one, it's been growing at a crazy angle because it hasn't had any support. And although it's been growing at a kind of dodgy angle because it's been knocked down, it actually has new sprouts coming up along here. So maybe I'll get something off of them if I can get this tuber out. So much weeds. Okay, so this tuber is absolutely massive. I'm definitely going to have to divide these, but there are lots of young shoots still coming up on this one, so I'm hopeful I might still get a few Dahlia, possibly, of this before we get our frost. Okay, so yay! We have all our Dahlia tubers out, and they're absolute beasts, so I'm definitely going to have to spend some time dividing these. I've left some of the leaves on, but I have cut most of the foliage off to try and get these to transplant and possibly send up other shoots once I actually get them in the ground. So now that this bit is all empty, which you can see, in here is also where I had all my tulips. So this year I planted Dahlia, then tulip, then Dahlia, then tulip, and it was a great pairing. The tulip came up and were done, and as the leaves for them were dying back, my Dahlia started to wake up and come through as well. So I was really, really happy with that pairing. Some of my pairings didn't work. I put my gladiola in with my poppy, and that was a disaster because the poppy came up much bigger than I expected, knocked the gladiola down, shaded them out, and just made a mess, really. So that didn't work. But this really worked. So if you're looking on how to optimize space without having to plant annuals all the time, then I really recommend your tulip with your Dahlia. But now I have to go through and dig up all of my tulip bulbs. So let's see what we can find. I haven't had much luck with my bulbs. I lost all of my anemone, nearly all of my ranunculus. I got very few freesia. The only thing I really managed to pull out were my daffodil. But I'm hoping that because the tulip bulbs are bigger, they might still be in here. So let's get digging and see what we can find. I was starting to get a bit worried there. I wasn't finding much, but I am starting to find some now. So So let's keep going and see how many I can find. There you go, look, tulip bulbs. This is really strange. I planted these in straight lines. They came up in straight lines, and now I'm digging out the bulbs. There's not a straight line in sight. You'd think they should all just be where I put them, but I'm finding them all over the place. And some are really close to the surface and some are really deep down. Okay, so that is all dug up, and I have definitely done better here than I have with any of the other bulbs. There are some there, but it's still not as many as I planted. And while I was digging those ones, I found plenty that were like this, just hollowed out, eaten shells. I also found an incredible amount of red Japanese beetle living in the soil, so I'm guessing that's explaining what is happening to a lot of my bulbs, and maybe what happened to all of my anemone and my ranunculus and my freesia as well. A lot of those were just completely munched through. So I got some tulip bulbs. They're not as big as I thought they would be, and there are not as many as I planted, but it's something to put in the ground. The only thing is, now that I have dug them all up like this, I have no idea which one's which, so that'll be a nice surprise come spring, see what tulips are actually going to come up. I'm really hoping it's the black ones, because they were my favourites. So now the only thing left to do is to pull up my salvia and try and take that with us, and then officially plot 17 will be empty of plants. Still heaps of weeds, but empty of plants. Salvia. And officially the last thing from this garden. So now we're going to tidy up here a little bit and then take all of this right over to the new allotment and get it in the ground as quickly as possible before these roots have any chance of drying out. Okay, so here we are down on the new allotment. I've got Key putting some mulch down here on the walkways to try and keep the weeds at bay. And I have my bag of Dahlia, which are already looking very sad. They didn't like being squished in the car. But we're going to try and get these in the ground, and I'm going to put these right here at the front. You can see where I have put my chrysanthemum, and then I've got some straw flower. Mixed results on how well they transferred. And I'm going to get my Dahlia up here at the end. Okay, so these Dahlia are obviously going to need separated. These are absolutely huge monsters. Each one of these little potato looking bits, it can make its own plant. My Dahlia last year were a lot better than this year. Now that was for two reasons. This year I went away for most of June, and that's when these really started to put out flowers, and I wasn't deadheading them, which meant that they were going to seed and the plant wasn't being as productive. But also I think because I was a little bit lazy last year and a little bit scared, to be honest, about separating these, that I put in quite big tubers, and you just can't really do that. They're going to fight for the nutrients, they're going to fight for space, and they're just not going to grow as well. So I really noticed this year that my Dahlia were nowhere near as good as they were last year. So I am definitely going to have to wait for these to die back and then separate them out. This one I actually just pulled this little bit off that came out of there. And I'd managed to pull that away. So, you know, that could be an easy way for me to separate them now, to make sure they've all got growing eyes on them. But I am going to have to dig these back up at the end of the season and try and separate them out. Now, when I'm going to put this many Dahlia, I have no idea. And I don't really know anyone with gardens to offer them to either. So I'm going to have way too many Dahlia. But that's a problem for next month. For now, I'm just going to get these in the ground, knowing that I'm going to have to dig them up very, very soon. Okay, so this is relatively easy for a few reasons. One, Dahlia don't like to be dug very deep. They want to be sitting right at the top of the surface. You don't want the tuber to be sitting in damp, wet soil, because they will just rot. They prefer to be much closer to the top of the surface, where they'll get the rain, but then it'll drain down and leave them relatively dry. The second is because this soil is amazing. Now I know that I've just put a load of compost and topsoil and stuff on this to try and amend it, but I'm kind of seeing that although this garden is further away, possibly moving here was actually a good thing. A, it's bigger. I've gone from 4 by 5 meters to 6 by 6.5, and that means I've got a whole extra row, and my rows are longer. But also, this place is further away from the beach. I live in a beach town, which means all of the soil around me is really sandy. And the soil in the old allotment was just like dust. And even today, when we had rain yesterday and we had a little bit of rain this morning, when I was digging these out, there was no moisture in the soil at all. Whereas this, I mean, look at that. It's lovely, it's holding the moisture. It's just a much nicer, richer soil to be working in. So this stuff's great. Yeah. That is a monster. Look at the size of that. Oh, it's broken off by accident. Okay, and our dahlia is all dug in. Not looking particularly healthy, I might chop that bit off. But in. Ta-da! Okay, so the last thing I need to do today is get this salvia back in the ground. It's not looking very healthy either, but it is a perennial, so as long as I get the roots in the ground, I'm hoping that if it doesn't genki up for me now, that it will at least come back for me next year. So I have my Sweet William, some geum, and some Lisianthus. The geum has died back completely. I don't know if that's going to come back. And my Lisianthus, I mean, I've been growing this for so long now and I've only got one. I don't know what it's doing, but I'll keep it in. My Sweet William's looking okay. I mean, it's starting to die back. It is cooling off. It's by nowhere cold, but again, that should come back for me next year. Then I have my Orangium in here, which you can't really see. It does have a little green tuft sticking out here, so it is going to come back. And then I have my Echinacea behind that. So I am going to put my Salvia in here next to my Echinacea, and eventually this should be a whole row of perennials, because I then have my Scabious, my Rudbeckia and my Achillea. So this is kind of like my perennial zone. So I'm going to get these Salvia in here. Okay, and that is all in. So now I'm going to give everything a good water, finish as much weeding as we can, and that is us for today.
Daddy, make a rainbow. You're making a rainbow.
And that is all from me this week. So if you want to follow along and see how we're doing in this garden, how everything transplants, then please hit the subscribe button below. I'm about to move on to my autumn sowing and getting some bulbs in here. Look at these guys. Not much of a help in the garden right now. Yeah, I'm going to be getting my autumn sowing started and some bulbs in the ground, which is really exciting to get this filled up to make sure that I have a good spring ahead of me, having missed out on basically most of my summer flowers because I was away, and all of my autumn flowers, unless I get some of my chrysanthemum and strawflower and dahlia, which is what I'm really hoping for. I at least want to start spring strong. It's been so strange not having loads and loads of flowers in my house. I've become so used to having fresh flowers every week that it's just really bizarre for me to not have anything. I'm not liking it at all. So the sooner I get stuff in the soil, the better. If you want to see what I do with all of my flowers, then you can check out my Instagram page, which is From the Witch's Garden, and there is a link to that below this video, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!